The stars above the Sol system shimmered like cold diamonds as the Veltorax entered its outer edge, gliding smoothly through the dark void like a great silver predator. It was a vessel of the Galactic Alliance, sent to investigate a strange energy reading coming from an unmarked sector, a forgotten patch of space, where old battles were rumored to have taken place. Captain Yiller, a Xanthari commander known for his strategic calm, watched the screen as his crew scanned the region. There was no planet nearby, no station, just a massive object drifting slowly in the black. The object had no registration beacon, no active signals, and appeared dead at first glance. But it wasn't an asteroid, nor was it a piece of junk. It was a warship. Massive. Cold. Silent. Its design was different from anything the Alliance had seen in over 3 centuries. Its body was dark metal, weathered but strangely elegant, with sharp edges and a structure that looked like it had been built not just to fight, but to survive anything. The crew stared in awe, not knowing whether they were looking at a ruin or a relic. The ship floated like a corpse among the stars, and yet it gave off a quiet presence, one that felt unsettling. Curious, and perhaps a little overconfident, Captain Yiller ordered a deep scan. The analysis beams swept across the hull, and the Veltorax's computers began to pick up strange readings, weapon ports sealed shut but active, power lines dormant but intact, and a strange signature deep inside the vessel, almost like a sleeping mine. The ship was old, no doubt, but it wasn't dead. "This technology is outdated," one officer said, but even he couldn't hide the tension in his voice. The crew chuckled nervously, treating the warship like a forgotten toy, but then the scan reached the core of the vessel. In an instant, the ship's internal systems flared to life. Dim red lights blinked on across its surface, forming a spine of glowing ports that illuminated the darkness like eyes opening after a long sleep. One by one, sensor arrays turned, and deep within the ship, something shifted. A presence. A system. A mind. Then came the voice, a deep, cold signal transmitted across every Alliance frequency in the region. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. Identify yourself. You have breached Terran sovereign military property. Defense systems engaged. For a few seconds, no one on the Veltorax moved. The name Terran was a ghost from old records, stories told in training rooms, warnings passed down from species who had fought and barely survived. According to Alliance archives, the humans had burned themselves out long ago, consumed by their wars and ambitions. The last Terran ship was believed to have disappeared over 300 years ago. But now, one had returned, or rather, had been found. Captain Yiller tried to hail the vessel. "This is the Veltorax of the Galactic Alliance. We come in peace." No answer. Only silence, and then, without warning, one of the warship's turrets slowly rotated and locked onto the Veltorax. It didn't fire. It didn't even charge its weapons. It just watched. The Alliance crew could feel the tension tightening like a cord inside their chests. Suddenly, the ship broadcast again, but this time it was not a warning. It was a statement. A name. A declaration. Leviathan. That was all. A single word. But the way it echoed across their systems, the way the ship seemed to wake just a little more after speaking it, it made the Veltorax crew uneasy. Deep inside the Leviathan, massive engines coughed back to life, not with full power, but with enough to shift its position. It turned ever so slightly, facing the Veltorax fully, and now the ship's scale became clear. It was not just a warship, it was a city of war, a floating fortress built for extinction-level events. Its hull bore marks of past battles, deep scars, but none of its systems appeared compromised. The Alliance ship backed off, uncertain whether to stay or flee. "Should we engage?" asked one officer. "No," Yiller replied, his usual calm beginning to falter. That would be a mistake. He had seen war, and he had seen monsters. What floated before him was not asleep anymore, and whatever this Leviathan once was, it had not forgotten how to fight. He called for reinforcements, though part of him regretted it instantly. If this ship was truly human, if Terrans had built this, then it wasn't just a ship they had awakened. It was a memory, one that the galaxy had buried long ago for a reason. As the Leviathan systems began to hum and old machinery stirred in its silent corridors, a single figure deep within a stasis chamber opened her eyes. Her breath caught as cold air filled her lungs. The AI voice in her ear whispered, "Commander Asha Varel, welcome back. Humanity is gone, but we have been awakened." And with that, the true story began, not of peace, not of exploration, but of what happens when ancient power, long buried, rises again because someone dared to disturb the grave of giants. A slow hum vibrated through the cold metal bones of the Leviathan as its systems continued to awaken, not with panic, but with purpose, like a predator stretching after a long hibernation. Inside the sealed cryochamber, the frosted glass cracked open with a sharp hiss, releasing frozen mist into the dark corridor. Commander Asha Virel gasped as her lungs filled with real air for the first time in over 3 centuries. Her heart pounded, body weak but alive, muscles trembling as memories began to return in scattered flashes: war, fire, silence, the final order to sleep until humanity was needed again. The AI's voice, calm and emotionless, greeted her in her earpiece. "Commander, stasis time, 312 years. Earth, status unknown. Alliance vessels detected in proximity. Threat level, moderate to escalating." Asha struggled to her feet, gripping the cold railing as her mind processed the information. "Demon, confirm," she said, voice hoarse. "Why are we awake?" The AI responded with chilling clarity. "Unauthorized deep scan of Leviathan. Defense protocol triggered. Alliance presence deemed intrusive. Risk of engagement increasing." Asha blinked, trying to focus as the lights flickered on across the corridor in a rhythmic pattern, guiding her toward the central bridge. As she walked slowly through the ship's dark heart, she passed sealed doors, frozen compartments, and the remains of her crew. Most had died during the final years of the war, others placed in stasis, never waking again. She was the last of her kind aboard, a ghost in a tomb made of metal and fury. When she reached the command center, it lit up automatically, recognizing her biosignature. Screens flickered to life, showing the external camera feeds outside. The stars shimmered, but more importantly, several smaller Alliance vessels now circled the Leviathan at a cautious distance. They hadn't attacked, not yet, but their formation was tightening, their weapons systems warming up. The biggest ship, marked as Harmony's Voice, was broadcasting peace messages, but Demon had already flagged them as tactical distractions. "They fear us," Demon observed. Asha watched in silence as one Alliance ship released a probe, likely to map the Leviathan structure. She narrowed her eyes. "Let them see. Let them remember who we are." She sat slowly in the worn captain's chair and adjusted the old Terran military badge still clipped to her suit. It read, simply, Varel, oh. Beneath it, the old motto, "Last to fall." Demon shifted the Leviathan slightly, engines stabilizing the ship's axis, making it face the Alliance vessels fully. Then it began transmitting low-frequency signals, old Terran war codes. Not meant for communication, but for recognition. Asha knew that if any records survived in the Alliance databanks, they would see those codes and understand what they were dealing with. The response came quickly. One of the smaller ships fell back. Another powered down its weapons. But the flagship, Harmony's Voice, held its ground. A transmission came through, and the image of an alien envoy appeared on the Leviathan's primary screen. The being had a long silver face, thoughtful eyes, and a tone of carefully measured curiosity. "This is Scholar Envoy Tilex of the Galactic Alliance. You are a Terran construct, correct? We believed your species extinct." Asha leaned forward, staring at the figure. "Humanity isn't extinct," she said, her voice steady now. "We just stopped talking." Tilex blinked, clearly unsettled. "We did not intend to provoke. We were exploring." Asha let the silence hang for a few moments, then replied, "You scanned a warship. A sleeping one. You didn't explore. You knocked on the door of a grave." Before the envoy could respond, alarms flashed across the Leviathan's interface. Another ship, one not, part of the diplomatic group, had powered weapons. "Unauthorized weapons, lock detected, Demon announced calmly, recommending preemptive countermeasures. Asha hesitated, her hand hovering near the command console. She didn't want to fire the first shot, but if they started this, she would finish it. Hold, she ordered. Let them show their hand. Outside, the rogue Alliance ship broke formation and edged closer. Perhaps it was testing the Terran vessel, or perhaps its captain believed Leviathan was bluffing. Either way, it was a mistake. The moment it crossed a specific threshold, a section of the Leviathan's hull opened like the mouth of a waking beast, and a single railgun rotated into position. No glow, no sound. Just precision and silence. The Alliance ship immediately backed off, its captain realizing the firepower aimed directly at its core. No shots were fired, but a message had been sent. Tillix's image flickered back on screen, face pale. That ship acted independently. We did not authorize aggression. Asha nodded, eyes locked on his. Neither did we. Yet, here we are. For a moment, silence stretched between both sides. Then Asha stood, walking across the command deck, her footsteps echoing in the chamber. She gazed out through the observation window, watching the stars as she thought of Earth, what remained of it, if anything. Demon, she said quietly, is Earth still transmitting? A pause. Negative. Final signal received 170 years ago. No contact since. Her heart ached, but she showed no sign of it. The galaxy had moved on, and she had awoken in a time where her people were no more. But the Leviathan remained. It was her home, her legacy, and possibly the last piece of human will still alive in the stars. The Alliance had found a relic, but they hadn't realized that it still breathed. She turned back to the console, her expression hardening. Demon, prepare limited systems. Defensive mode only. Show them we're not seeking war. But if they test us again, we remind them. As the ship's systems hummed with restrained energy, lights flickering like nervous eyes, the Alliance fleet drifted just beyond firing range, caught between fear and fascination. They had scanned a relic, expecting ruins. Instead, they had awakened something that remembered everything. Not just pain and loss, but how to win. The Leviathan did not boast. It did not threaten. It simply existed. And sometimes, that was enough to shake the stars. The Galactic Alliance's fleet gathered around the Leviathan, their warships like wary hunters circling a sleeping beast that had begun to stir, casting long shadows in the dark expanse. Inside the vast chambers of the Leviathan, Commander Asha Virel watched the alien ships with a mix of caution and simmering resolve. The memories of humanity's final wars flickered in her mind like distant thunder, violent and unavoidable. Earth had been a place of fire and iron. But now, so much time had passed, and the universe had changed. The Alliance, a coalition of many species, had built a fragile peace based on shared fear and treaties. Yet the sudden reawakening of the Leviathan shattered that peace like glass underfoot. Within the Alliance command halls, panic spread quickly as reports came in from ships scanning the warship's ancient archives. The word Terran echoed through the corridors like a curse, bringing back stories of a species long thought extinct but legendary for their brutal wars and unmatched tactics. The elders spoke quietly about humanity as a force that had once nearly consumed the galaxy before fading into the shadows. Now, the Leviathan's power made it clear those stories were only half the truth. An emergency meeting convened, where diplomats and military leaders argued fiercely. Some urged immediate attack, fearing the Terran ship was a threat that could awaken a new war. Others cautioned restraint, suggesting dialogue could prevent disaster. But the Leviathan did not wait for their decisions. It moved with quiet purpose, a slow but undeniable demonstration of strength. A team of envoys from the Alliance was sent aboard the Leviathan under a flag of truce, hoping to understand the humans who had returned from legend. Commander Varel met them in the bridge, her face hardened by years of war and loss, her eyes burning with a cold fire. She told them of Earth's final days, of the Centurion Wars that had torn apart humanity and pushed it into hiding. She spoke of sacrifice and survival, of a promise to protect what remained of human legacy, even if it meant walking among strangers in a strange time. The envoys listened with mixed fear and fascination. The Leviathan was no museum. It was a weapon, a symbol of a fierce pride that had not faded. Yet, it was also a warning, a message to those who thought they could erase humanity from them. Stars. But tension grew. Not all alliance ships honored the truce. One vessel, bold or reckless, aimed weapons at the Leviathan, shattering the fragile calm. In response, the warship's defenses sprang to life with terrifying precision electromagnetic pulses, nanite swarms, and silent but deadly countermeasures. Ships were disabled without loss of life, a show of control that left the Alliance fleet shaken and unsure. The message was clear. Humanity's ghost had returned, not to conquer, but to remind the galaxy of its power and resilience. Inside the Leviathan, the AI demon shared with Asha the final transmissions from Earth, images of battles, cries for peace, moments of hope and despair. It was history alive, a warning to those who might forget the cost of ignoring humanity's legacy. The broadcast reached every Alliance ship, echoing across communication channels with a solemn voice. This is not a declaration of war. This is a memory, a warning. The envoys, shaken and humbled, begged for peace, urging their leaders to seek understanding rather than conflict. Asha, standing tall amidst the ruins of her past, knew this was a turning point. The Leviathan could destroy fleets, but it also carried the last hope of a people who refused to vanish quietly. The galaxy watched and waited, caught between fear and fascination, as humanity's echo grew louder once more. The legacy of war was not just destruction, it was survival, resilience, and the fierce hope that sometimes awakening a monster was the only way to remind the universe that some fires never die. The silence that had hovered over the Leviathan since its awakening was about to break, and with it, the uneasy calm gripping the Galactic Alliance fleet began to shatter. Inside the immense warship, systems that had lain dormant for centuries roared to life as power surged through veins of ancient metal, lighting up corridors and deep chambers that had not seen a living soul for generations. Commander Asha Virel stood at the heart of the ship, her eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the tense formations of Alliance vessels just beyond weapon range. The cold light reflected in her gaze was not just of caution, it was the fire of something long buried, survival instincts, honed in countless battles, the stubborn will of a species that refused to be forgotten. Around her, the Leviathan's AI demon orchestrated a complex symphony of systems awakening, balancing defensive shields, power reserves, and sensor networks with terrifying precision. Every ship in the Alliance fleet could see the Leviathan's readiness growing, a silent promise that it was no longer merely a relic drifting in space, but a force fully prepared to respond. Reports flooded the Leviathan's command center. Small Alliance probes were being pushed back with precision electronic countermeasures, sensors detecting increased energy outputs in hidden weapon bays, and defensive turrets quietly rotating into position like watchful sentinels. Outside, the Alliance ships tightened their circle, unsure whether to prepare for war or diplomacy, but the tension was electric, thick enough to be cut with a blade. Asha's voice broke through the hum of systems, steady and commanding. Demon, bring up tactical overlays. Prepare limited offensive protocols, show restraint, but demonstrate we will not be ignored. Her words were met with a cold, logical reply. Protocols engaged. Estimated engagement window, 27 minutes. Enemy fleet posture, uncertain but escalating. Minutes passed like hours as both sides waited, trapped in a dangerous standoff where a single spark could ignite a galaxy-wide conflict. Inside the Leviathan, memories of ancient battles stirred within Asha, fleeting images of firestorms on Earth, the last desperate commands broadcast over dying comms, the faces of comrades lost to time. She felt the weight of those memories pressed down on her, but also a fierce resolve to protect what remained of humanity's honor. Then, without warning, the silence shattered. From the depths of the Leviathan, hidden weapon platforms emerged, vast railguns and missile launchers sliding out from their sealed compartments with mechanical precision. Power cores thrummed, casting an ominous glow that danced on the ship's hull. The Leviathan was ready to defend itself and, if forced, to destroy. Asha's gaze hardened as the Leviathan's sensors locked onto the closest Alliance cruiser, its weapons already trained but not yet firing. Then came the transmission, calm but resolute, broadcast across all frequencies. "This is Commander Asha Virel of the Leviathan, Terran Sovereign Military. We did not ask to be awakened. We do not seek needless war. But understand this, any aggression will be met with overwhelming response. Choose your path wisely." Silence answered her words, but the tension escalated as one of the Alliance ships edged forward, scanning for weak points. It was a dangerous gamble, testing the limits of patience from a ship that had survived humanity's darkest hours. As the cruiser moved closer, a pulse of energy shot out from the Leviathan, a precise electromagnetic burst that disabled the ship's weapon systems without causing harm. The message was clear. The Leviathan could fight without destroying, but it would not hesitate if pushed. Back aboard, the flagship Harmony's voice, Commander Yiller's expression was grim. The Leviathan was no longer just a warship. It was a symbol of power, a sleeping monster that had finally opened its eyes. The Galactic Alliance was caught between fear of destruction and a fragile hope for peace. Yet no one could ignore the reality. Humanity's legacy was not dead. Asha, standing firm amid the glow of tactical displays, knew this was just the beginning. The Leviathan had awoken not just to defend itself, but to reclaim a place in the galaxy that was once theirs. The monster was stirring, and the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see if the awakening would bring destruction or something more profound, a reckoning. The countdown was underway, and when the Leviathan moved again, it would no longer be a relic, but a force reshaping the future. The Leviathan's hum grew louder, filling every corner of the ancient warship with a steady pulse, a heartbeat that had waited centuries to resume its rhythm. Commander Asha Virel stood in the command center, her gaze fixed on the swirling starfield beyond the observation window, where the Galactic Alliance fleet hovered like an uncertain shadow. They had spent weeks circling each other in tense silence, neither side willing to make the first move that could ignite a devastating war. But the Leviathan was no longer a sleeping giant. It was a sentinel, awakened with a purpose. The Legacy Protocol, a plan crafted in the darkest days of humanity's last great conflict, was ready to be enacted. This protocol was not just about survival. It was a message, a declaration of what humanity had once been and what it still could be. Demon, the Leviathan's AI, projected the ancient files onto the holographic display, encrypted records of Earth's final stand, the collective knowledge, technology, and memories of millions of souls preserved in digital form. Asha's voice was steady as she addressed the Alliance envoys who had come aboard under a fragile truce, their faces a mix of awe and fear. "You have seen our strength. Now you will understand why we endure." The Legacy Protocol was more than weapons and warships. It was a promise of peace through strength and a warning that the price of forgetting humanity's power was too high. Asha initiated the sequence, and the Leviathan systems shifted, releasing bursts of data to the nearby Alliance vessel's blueprints of lost